Guys, if you are not new to my channel, if you've been here for a little while, you already know where we are right now. And you already know what's about to go down after I fix this blanket, which is that we have a wonderful sit down freaking chat today, which are honestly some of my favorite videos to film because it feels like I'm sitting down with my girlfriends to just like chat about life. And what's really better than that? Like, is there really anything better than that? Especially too when I've got my coffee in hand. And the topic of today's video is one that I'm really, really excited to film, or should I say refilm, because I've technically done this before, but it was all the way freaking back to the first video on my channel. And I prefer not to go back to those days because you could say that it feels cringy. You could say that it's incredibly hard for me to watch. It's just not it for me. You know what I mean? I think that the topic of the video is there. I think the right intention is there, but the follow through, the delivery, it's a bit off, you know? So I wanted to refilm this video for a really long time on a serious note because although I love that very first video, it doesn't go through my full journey from where I was then to where I am now. And I feel like I wanted an updated story on my recovery journey. I personally love watching these type of videos because I think it's very, very inspiring to see where people started to where they are now when they recover. But as a disclaimer, I didn't even do that on purpose. I do want to say, please do not compare my journey to yours. Don't think that it needs to look like mine. Don't think that it needs to follow the same timeline or that you need to take the same steps as I did. It is all about what works for you in recovery. And that's going to look so different for every single person. So just think about that as I go through this. I honestly want this video to be helpful and yet also more of like a story timey video. I feel like most of the videos on my channel are kind of like, here's the question, here's what I'm gonna do about it. And so this one will be a little bit more personal, but I like to add in little helpful things along the way as well. And if you have questions as I go through it, feel free to drop them down below and I will answer any ones that you have. I do want to mention that if you are personally struggling with your relationship with food right now, I do have a program that has the exact tools that I used in my recovery that is available to all of you. It's currently taking applications. So I'm gonna link that down below. I'll probably talk more about that a little bit later on, but it's called Live Unrestricted. I did just wanna say that, mention that, because I think that it's very pertinent to this video. And if you're here looking for inspiration to recover yourself, then that's the video, or that's the program for you. So, with that being said, and that little slurpee of my coffee, let's dive in. This intro is already long, but we all knew I was gonna be chatting a lot in this video, didn't we? We all freaking knew. I grew up with a really good relationship with food. And I just wanna say that to preface all of this. I didn't have parents that struggled a ton with food. Of course, I was exposed to diet culture and challenges throughout my middle school, high school, and elementary school experience. But overall, I had a very positive relationship with food where I was quite intuitive, and my family instilled that in me from a young age as well. So I was very grateful to have that. Now, I did have a very perfectionistic, overachieving, and sometimes overutilization of exercise to work through those things throughout my younger years. So I will say that that was very prevalent from the beginning. But I did not start struggling with food until my junior year of high school. Why I started to struggle with food, although I don't think that this was necessarily the exact reason, I think this was the catalyst that was basically leading to an inevitable result, was that a trainer that I had told me that I should start tracking my food for my athletic performance. He told me to like write everything down and see how it made me feel. So that sent me into a spiral, ladies and gents. So we started with that, and then I wanted to track longer. And then I wanted a tracker that was better. So then I started my Fitness Pal, and of course I was just using my Fitness Pal at first to track how I felt and to just make sure that I was eating enough. And then next thing you know, I was looking at calories. Then I became obsessed with the different types of foods and making the foods healthier and better and better and better and better and better and better. The definition of better was completely what I created in my mind though. I justified a lot of this by saying that it was for my athletic performance. And of course, if you go from not fueling your body as well to fueling it with really wholesome foods that you weren't eating a lot of, you're gonna notice a shift. But then after that point in time, I became so obsessed with it that it started to not even help because it became so much of an obsession. So I would say by my senior year of high school, I was dealing with full-blown orthorexia, struggling with tracking my food, exercise obsession, and I wouldn't say there was this huge fixation on weight, but definitely a fixation on performance. Now, I took that into my freshman year of college. So I went to the University of Arizona, and I grew up in Colorado, just in case people were wondering, for a little bit of context, for a little bit of sharing. And although I was struggling during my senior year of high school, I just feel like it was really easily swept under the rug because I could mask it in other things. And I think my parents somewhat knew, I think people in my life knew, but I don't think anybody knew to the fullest extent. And then when I went into college, no one there knew me, right? And I had an Instagram at the time, actually. It was Mallory's Fit Kitchen, throwback, where I shared all these healthy recipes and the things I ate, and I cooked in my dorm and all of this stuff. So people there really just thought I was being healthy, especially because although I definitely had an athletic body type, and although I know that I wasn't in the best place with where my body was at for me, I wasn't one of those people that you looked at and thought, oh, she looks so sick, which people think is uncommon. People think because of what they see in the media that really, really like kind of this, I'm trying to think of the right words. They think of this underweight version of eating disorders, and that is prevalent. Anorexia is a prevalent eating disorder. It's very important and deserves all the recognition that it gets. But I wish that there was more representation for all types of eating disorders. Guys, there's so many freaking types. I won't go on a tangent, but let me tell you, there are so many types. But back to what we were saying, I was working out for extensively long periods of time. I was absolutely exhausted from doing that because I was waking up super early in the morning to do so and staying up really late to do so. I began weighing my food, which I had this scale. It would weigh everything that I ate. I had a specific number of calories that I would allow myself each day. And the amount of foods that I could eat, which I kind of forgot to mention this in my senior year, but was so small. Like, it just kept shrinking more and more and more and more by the day. And I had convinced myself, not just that I couldn't have those foods, but that I was allergic to those foods. That my body, if I were to put that into my body would just absolutely reject it. And it was as if I felt like something truly horrible would happen if I did that, which we could have a whole conversation about this. I'm gonna keep saying this throughout the video because there's so many things that this spurs in my mind as I talk through it. But this is common to feel like something truly horrible could happen to your body. And I want people to know that because a lot of the times people think that EDs only have to do with the fear of weight gain or a fear of your body changing, which is true, and I still dealt with that. But when you deal with perfectionistic personalities, even OCD tendencies, I'm not saying that for me, but I've seen this commonly in my diagnosed clients, and even just like really rigid rules around everything you do in your life, it can be very, very hard for those people not just to do these things because they're afraid of gaining weight, but do them because it breaks these rules and they feel like they're subjecting their body to something that they shouldn't have. So that is more along the lines of what I struggled with. So I remember I wouldn't drink alcohol, which of course there are positive reasons why people don't drink alcohol, but for me it was out of the wrong reason. And it got to the point where I would stay up for hours a night, literally sitting in my bed, planning out every single thing that I was going to have the next day. And if something went wrong, or if I didn't have my scale to weigh something, I would literally have a breakdown. Like I would cry and I would be so upset. And that was probably, although not the worst time in my life from like repercussions that came from my eating disorder, I would say that was the deepest part of my eating disorder. Constantly feeling hungry, constantly being tired, always feeling like I had to do all of this movement, and just being so trapped and not telling anyone. And I was very body obsessed too. I don't want to act like I wasn't. It was a constant progress pictures. I had such an obsession with being better and doing more and all of these things for my athletic performance. Even though I wasn't even a freaking athlete. I mean, everybody's an athlete, but you know what I'm saying. So into my sophomore year, I struggled with that about the first half. And then when I got to the second half of my sophomore year, I actually went on this trip to Vegas. This is a thing if you go to University of Arizona, where you can go on a weekend trip to Vegas with whoever like takes you. And so I was with my date at the time, and I remember we fell asleep from a day party and we woke up so late, and we were supposed to be at the club. I love how this is, every time I tell this story, I'm like, I love how this is the story. Like, this is why, first of all, you shouldn't compare your journey to me, because it's all, mine is freaking all over the place anyways. But anyways, so I remember he was like, well, we don't have time to go out to dinner. We just need to go and run and get something. So we're like literally running across the street and we see this pizza place. And he's like, oh, I think we should just have this pizza. And for me, I was terrified. But at that point, I had started to really live my life more. I had gone through a breakup, and I was really just kind of getting so tired and run down from doing this for so long. You know, it had been like maybe 2 years at that point, about 2 years. And so we did that, and that was my first time having pizza in, I think, like 2 years basically, which was the craziest feeling ever. And I felt like, I remember when I got home from that trip, I literally cried because I felt so much relief for being able to actually break through this fear that I'd had that was so strong. But unfortunately, because I didn't want to get help, even though I wish I would have now that I look back, but that's a tangent. I'll talk about that later. And like, I wanted the freedom, but I didn't know how to let go of the control. I didn't know how to get to the freedom, and I didn't want to ask for help, and I didn't want to tell anybody. And so that really spurred what my binge and restrict cycle was. So I feel like at this time, although I still held on to like these ideals around food, that like what was healthy and what was not healthy and what I could eat and what I couldn't, it became much more restrictive. And it was a really hard mental time for me to be going through that, because when you deal with true binges, which if you have dealt with one, you know, it's those embarrassing moments where you're like with your friends and you're the one that eats like this entire pizza that's like 5 times more than you wanted within like 3 minutes, not 3 minutes, but literally so quickly, and you feel so sick and you feel so embarrassed and out of control. And yet you feel so trapped, like you don't know what to do. Especially, not to mention, if you're at a big university, like University of Arizona is a really hard place to be. eating disorder rates were so high. The norm was restrictive and disordered eating, which I think is incredibly common, sadly, at universities. And I feel like I could just so easily fall into that pattern without people noticing, even as I changed from such a stringent pattern of like the health that I used to be in. But don't get me wrong, I was still trying to uphold all these orthorexic ideals while also living this double life of partying and binge drinking and binge eating and beating myself up, and just really was in this negative toxic cycle. And I really feel like that went on for quite a long time, until pretty much my second semester of my junior year of college, so like a full year. And that was when I started having debilitating anxiety attacks, where I would have hours and hours in a day where I would just be completely frozen. But actually, let me track backwards, because I forgot to mention sophomore year going into junior year. I want to mention this quickly. I went abroad and I had total food freedom when I was abroad. But when I came back and I saw that my body changed, I freaked out and I relapsed. So relapses, although they suck, they are normal, and don't beat yourself up if you have one, and don't feel like that means you failed, because that's what I felt like. I felt like I just failed. And so because of that, I just stopped and went all the way back to my old habits and continued those into the second semester of my junior year, when my body literally said I couldn't do it anymore. And that was a really miserable time of my life and a really hard time. I struggled a lot with feeling like I no longer wanted to be on the earth. I struggled with feeling like I would never get out of the cycle. And yeah, I still refuse to acknowledge the association between my ED and these anxiety attacks and these flashbacks and all of the stuff that I dealt with, because it's like so much to go into, right? When you're talking about an ED story, because you're talking about an ED story, but you're talking about so many things. Because that same summer when I came back and relapsed, I had also gone through sexual assault, and I had also just been dealing with some really tough mental health because of all this binge drinking, all the things I was doing. And so I bring that up not to dwell on these things, but to say that when you're dealing with an ED, it's never as simple as the ED itself. It's never just the food. And that's what I couldn't bring myself to realize. I couldn't bring myself to realize how my ED was a coping mechanism, a protective mechanism for everything else that I was suppressing and I would not deal with. And I think that that semester of my junior year forced me finally to come out of that. And so I did an internship at a place called Exos, and it was really, really healing for me, not specifically because of like my eating disorder. I don't know why I'm like getting emotional. Okay, bring it together. I was not expecting to get emotional at all. I don't think I've ever shared like the parts of my journey though, like that I was suppressing. Like I haven't shared them on YouTube yet. It's something I want to talk more about. I shared them briefly in a TikTok on my Instagram. But I do think like some of those parts, like sexual assault, are still things I'm processing through. Back to where we were. So that semester was really healing for me. I started meditating. I started actually incorporating foods again, like on a day-to-day basis, like just going out to dinner or eating with my boyfriend. Like I really started to heal because I didn't want to be in that cycle anymore. I would say I still had much too strong of a reliance on exercise. That was a big thing for me that I struggled with a lot, was having that reliance on exercise. But in terms of food, it really started to get so much better throughout my whole senior year. I still held on to some of the same orthorexic tendencies, and that was tough, especially because my senior year of college, while I was doing this, my gut health issues went insane, which if you are in a recovery journey, if you have been through one, you know how freaking tough they are. And it can make you question if you're doing the right thing, because I feel like, okay, I'm adding all these foods, I'm having this freedom, I'm like finally living my life, and yet I'm in more pain and my stomach hurts and I don't understand. I'm constantly bloated, which if you're struggling with that, I do have videos. I will link them down below on like my bloating and recovery journey and how to work through that and all of that different stuff. But yet again, if I just worked with someone, I would have known that this is so common. 90, I think is it 97? It's either 97 or 98% of people that struggle with anorexia also have a gastrointestinal or gut health disorder. So IBS, Crohn's, like SIBO, something like that. Because when you mess with their gut, you mess with so much. Once I got through that and I graduated, I felt like I was in a pretty good place. And I was in my dietetic internship. I was living in Oklahoma. And that is when I would have made that first video that if you're a real OG, you would know. And maybe you're watching this video after watching that one. That's basically where I shared about my eating disorder for the first time. And in typical me fashion, instead of like sharing it with individual people, I just share it with the world. I don't know why I do that, but it seems very healing for me. And I always am so grateful for the support that I get from you all. And that felt like it lifted a really big weight off of my shoulders. And I think throughout the entire duration of my dietetic internship, I really peeled back those like last layers of my ED. I was able to take long breaks from exercise. I was able to completely vary up the exercise I was doing where a walk would feel good enough. I was able to have immense body changes and not feel so stressed out about having those changes. I was able to allow Brian to pick foods for me. And I really feel like that's when I started to heal so much. And when I was talking about Live Unrestricted, those were the tools that I was using that I then put into this course for you guys. But essentially, those tools that I used as I was going through that process are the same ones that I put into Live Unrestricted. And then I paired that with the support that I give as a registered dietitian. And it really makes for the most transformative program that helps you to heal your relationship with food and your body and achieve the goals that you dream of for yourself so much more seamlessly than you could imagine when you compare it to the freaking ridiculous way that I went about it. So although I was able to achieve this recovery on my own, it was honestly the biggest regret, and I try not to regret anything in my life, but the biggest regret that I have is not working with someone, because it would have made my life, my mental health, my body, everything, literally everything, so much better. Because to finish up the story, I feel like I fully recovered around the time that I was like still kind of, I don't know what I would say. I would say like during my dietetic internship, I felt like I really recovered. Like I felt really good about where I was in my recovery. And that only continued to expand as I moved to Austin with my partner, as I like just kind of continued along that journey. Even during the pandemic, my relationship with food just continued getting better and better and better and better, which proved to me even more that I had achieved this recovery that I was wanting to achieve. Because I do fully believe personally that you can achieve full recovery and you can be recovered. I don't think that recovery itself with food is an ongoing journey. If you are working with the right person, you really reach that point. What I do believe is that the things that contributed to your challenges with food still may remain. So for me, like perfectionism is still something I struggle with, being a high achiever. Obviously the things that I was trying to control in my life, I still struggle with those things sometimes. But instead of struggling with them and then automatically going to food or exercise as a coping mechanism, I no longer do that. Like they're disconnected, if that makes sense. So now today, it's wild because I help women that are struggling with eating disorders and struggling with their relationship with food achieve a healthy relationship with both of those things again, or with food and body image again. And so it feels like such a gift that I went through this journey, and I'm so grateful that I did, although it was so challenging. I do think that with an ED, there are extreme negatives to it, and it's so important to choose recovery. But as you look back, you can also see the ways that it did serve you and it made you a stronger person and all of those different things. And so when I think about what I still deal with my eating disorder or my ED, I don't deal with anything with my ED. But I do deal with the after effects even now. I still deal with every now and again when my gut health falters a little bit, although it's pretty strong now after a lot of years of healing. I deal with issues in both of my knees because of how hard I was on them for years and years. And not being able to really move my body all in the same way because of it. I still deal with just issues of how my body feels and the stress that I held from going through it. So it's interesting how there are residual things that you will deal with that we don't even think about when you're in it in the moment. So, I also didn't speak about body image. Body image, I also think, is something that you deal with throughout your life, because people that don't struggle with EDs deal with struggles with body image, you know what I mean? But it's so different because you can have a day when you don't feel your best, but you don't automatically think, okay, how can I change what I'm eating? How can I work out more? How can I get back on track? You just say, this is my body at this point in time right now. And even if I'm struggling with it, I don't need to do anything to change it, if that makes sense. So I hope that that made sense as I walked through it. I tried to keep it to the Spark Notes version because even keeping it short, we're still over here almost hitting 30 minutes. But if you are interested in healing your relationship with food, I would love if you took the time to apply to live unrestricted, and I had the opportunity to work with you to heal and really to live your happiest, healthiest life again, because there's no time that you should wait for. The time is now. It never feels easy. It never gets less scary. It never has an ideal, there never is an ideal moment. You just have to do it. And then once you do, there will be so many positive shifts on your life. You just have to invest and bet on yourself. So I hope that you enjoyed this updated version of my journey. I really appreciate you listening. And if you have been here from the first video that I posted about this exact same topic, or if you are here now for the first time, I just have so much gratitude for you. And if you're going through a journey like this, or your own type of journey with any type of similarities, or struggling with your relationship with food, I have so much empathy and compassion for you, and I am sending you so much love. If I can be here in any way, please let me know. Do not hesitate to reach out. Do not hesitate to share in the comments. We can make this video a supportive community to be in. So definitely stick around if you enjoyed this. I make all different types of videos on my channel. You can click the subscribe button, and I hope to see you back here soon. Bye.